Thanks for coming back, and thank you for that amazing 5 minutes or 4 minutes and 32 seconds. I was a little worried at the top because like we had so much to talk about, and I wanted to start asking questions immediately. Um, and it was like, wait, there's a timer. I got to remember what we're doing here.
Mhm.
So it was
Hard to
really
get in
interesting.
under that 5 minute wire, especially with answering five or six questions. If you think a minute per question, it
Yeah,
can be a little struggling.
it's funny. I had to add a couple questions, and I think I found the perfect balance. I might sneak one more in there for future interviews just to really put some pressure and fire in there. But
Mm,
it's you can tell when you're very passionate about something because then the time just doesn't matter anymore. So I love
right.
kind of keeping that there. The We talked about like how you got into the field, and what I'm finding through a lot of these interviews is it's the same thing. I loved taking things apart. I think
Yeah.
that's like the origin story for every good tech or anybody in the industry is like, yeah, like my parents couldn't leave me around anything that was expensive because I would just take it apart and
You
then
know,
put it
it's
back together.
it's
But
really interesting that you use the words origin story. Our good friend Arlen Sorensen. I don't know if you know who he is from
mhm.
ConnectWise. I, get his blog, and one of his most recent ones was about origin story. And so, literally this weekend, I started writing my own origin story
Oh,
and
that's
trying to
amazing.
work through what that looks like, where it started, where I'm headed. Not just me, but us as an industry and us as a
Yeah.
company. But I really wanted to dive into like, what is my origin story? And started actually building that out this weekend. So
I think
it's
that the level of
interesting that you
self,
mentioned that.
yeah, and not to pivot too hard, but like to think about you look back at sometimes it's like, how did I get here? And just like the retrospection of just like, did I fall into this? Was it a series of like good decisions? Was it just pure luck? I like to count my blessings as to where I've, being able to make it to where I am now.
Hmm.
And then every once in a while, I'll have someone ask, like, so how do you do what you do? How'd you get there? And it's just almost like deer in the headlights. We're like, I don't know. It just kept working out, I guess. Like, is there, you
It's
know,
interesting as much as people complain about the GPTs and the LLMs and the things like that, and without
yeah.
getting, revealing too much personal information into any of those things, it was
Hmm.
really helpful as I started to think about that origin story. Like,
Yeah.
ask me questions to help me build this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really interesting exercise. I'm curious to see what, when you get it done, let me know. Cause I want to see kind of what you do with that. That'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I got to ask, what was it, your ability to go back and pick things apart and distill it down, I don't necessarily think you kind of shirked it off as like, oh, I guess this is kind of interesting, but like, it's an amazing talent to be able to bring highly complex items and just bring it down. I don't even want to use the term layman, but like just to bring it down to a digestible fashion.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of skill in that, and like I something I directly try to do with my channel.
Hmm.
And I've set myself like 2 minute windows to essentially try to explain incredibly complex things and then try to slam that in under 2 minutes, and it's harder than I thought it was going to be. And I figured like, oh, okay, I'll just pick a topic, I'll talk about it, 2 minutes will be one and done. But to get the tangible points across in that time, there's a skill to that. And I think it's often like we just take that for granted. Is that your experience with that as well? Like you found in time that like, hey, not everyone can do this.
Yeah, and again, back to the origin story. Like, risks, compliance, all the things that, I'm passionate about, at least this
Hmm.
point in life, they can be very complex. Um,
Yeah.
I have probably spent a lifetime like building analogies and working on storytelling.
Yep.
You mentioned one book, there's a bunch of books, but, the ability to, understand the why and tell a story that's relatable.
Hmm.
Um, I guess that's a skill. And it's, something that has taken me a long time to like learn how to hone that to be able to bring that relatability
Right.
to
Right.
our audience, to the people that we support, to, my friends and family for that matter.
Yeah.
Sometimes they
That's
say,
always.
you talk too much, stop with the story and just get my wife,
Yeah.
I love my wife. She's like, cliff notes, Tim.
Yeah. But there's like 6 years of history I got to explain first for this to make sense. Like, yeah, as always, I've always joked, like my mom will ask, so and so asked what you do for a living. And I just said computers. I'm like, yeah, that's probably without going through what the
Yep.
channel is, what the
Yeah.
cloud, like bailing down. If you're not in, you don't, there's an introductory course you got to take, but
Exactly.
uh, being able to distill that down is something that is, yeah, a true skill. And I think again, I keep going back to like an origin story. Just think of like if you're in high school and you're sitting, and it's like, what do you want to do for a living?
Do you want to know what I really wanted to do for
Yeah,
a living in high school?
it's
Was I wanted to
yeah,
be an underwater welder.
yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. I know my
Yeah.
I got a long line of welders and boilermakers in my family, and I decided to take the untrodden path essentially and go IT, which
Well,
is yeah,
still playing with my hands at some point. Just
yeah,
my life expectancy as an underwater welder versus,
a little bit
building a
lower. Yeah,
compliance company.
yeah. Sitting down though, it's pretty bad for you. So we
Yeah.
gotta make sure we got to
I have
stand
a
up.
stand-up desk though.
Yeah. Uh, Another thing, looks completely aside, and the bourbon thing,
Yeah.
and I know without going too far down, like I know you'd given up alcohol, which is commend you for that. It can be a blessing and a curse to our industry, right? A lot of stuff is happy hours and drinks, and
Yeah.
and it's I've suffered on both ends where it's like, I don't want to drink this month, but we're going out for happy
Of
hour, or like I got
course.
to be included. So like
Hmm.
it's really interesting to see someone like yourself kind of make the shift out. And I commend you for that.
No, thanks.
But how did you do the bourbon thing? Because I am a huge bourbon connoisseur. I love that. I didn't even realize that was a thing.
Oh, yeah. So there's a bunch of different places where you can kind of walk through the certification program. There is an actual bourbon steward certification component.
Wow.
Most of those are like in person because of the process. For
Right.
example,
Yeah.
not just understanding what's the difference between a bourbon or a whiskey, the theoretical
Hmm.
components of it, but the actual physical components of the smell, the taste, the
Right.
refining of your taste buds and your palate and understanding. Like most people, when they drink bourbon, they pour it in a glass, they throw an ice cube, and they swig it. It's totally wrong. Like
There's a
you're
lot.
missing
Yeah.
the whole experience, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, there's it's kind of fun because when I do go to conferences and our friends are like, "Hey, teach me how to drink this bourbon," and I show them like this is what
Yeah.
you do, and like cleanse your palate and all the things to walk
Yeah.
them through. But you can Google it. Certified bourbon
Oh,
steward.
for sure. Yeah.
Um, you know, in life, I have never done anything half-ass. And as I
Mm.
said, I was planning on leaving. Um, health has different reasons of why we choose not to drink or whatever,
Right.
and
Yep.
so made the choice to stop and actually want to be here for my grandbabies. So
Yeah.
yeah, um, but there's a path. There's a test. There's a bunch of different components, blind taste test, all the fun
Wow.
things around that. But it's kind of like getting your BJCP, which is a beer advocate or a beer judge, which I have as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
Which I have as well.
That's
I
awesome.
didn't do the wine sommelier because I'm not a big wine guy, but
Yeah.
yeah, I was.
That's interesting. Well,
All
like it's really interesting to see kind of like the pivots, and not to pull like an analogy or like a life lesson to be learned of this, but like you can pursue these passions and then pivot if you need to, right? Like
yeah.
time invested, time into when,
Mhm.
let's drop back to like the MSP space, and call it like tech debt, essentially.
Yeah,
Like this is life tech debt.
yeah.
Just don't be afraid to let it go, right? Like there's always the opportunity to move forward, always the opportunity to change. So,
Well, there were
it's
some
really
really
interesting.
great. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. There were
No,
some
no.
really great life lessons in that process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Building out a business plan. Bringing on a business partner, right? What I knew about the beer world, but I wasn't. I was a distiller. I wasn't a
Right.
brewer, although they're
Mm-hmm.
similar. And I had a business partner that was a brewer that could make
Right.
amazing beer. So we were like peanut butter and jelly.
Found your
But
synergies. Yeah.
the life lessons of building a business plan, getting multiple quotes, finding a location, understanding your total addressable market, understanding your actual
Mm-hmm.
service addressable market. What's the competition in the area? Where's the industry going to go?
Yeah.
All the same things that I'm now applying to compliance scorecard. I had to learn
Yeah.
all those hard lessons and research and dig and
Yeah.
figure a bunch of stuff out on my own, which then eventually set us up for success here at Compliance
Yeah.
Scorecard.
Yeah, I think, being able to look back on anything you do and being able to translate that into like future successes, I think is also a very powerful skill. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just, when you look at any successful business, you kind of, it's like, very rarely is someone like 21, like, yeah, I started a multi-million-dollar MSP. It's like, well, you got into it. You're just like, probably you were good at taking things apart and fixing it. You wanted to be the people pleaser,
Yeah.
and, you felt you'd be good for service industry. And yeah, you land your first client. And that's great. And then the next question is, well, how do you get your next 2, 4, 8,
Yeah.
10 clients? How do you scale? How do you do this? And I was like, oh, well, I just know how to flash the BIOS and build a server, and it's this overcoming, overwhelming thing. So like, it's time at things, trial
Yep.
and error.
At bats.
Yeah, I found that our community has been really supporting. Very rarely do you find someone in our community who's like, no, this is my info, it's proprietary, no one can touch it, it's mine. Like, everyone seems to be very willing for the most part to share experiences and learnings and lessons, and that's what I love about it, right? So
That's what I love about the community too. Back when I was building up, that beer stuff and the bourbon and
yeah.
spirits and all that fun stuff back then, it was all about building that community here in New England.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the time starting to kind of take over that, beer revolution that used to always be the
The
West
IPA
Coast
stuff, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
We built a Facebook group here just in New England for beer connoisseurs. I think it's over 10,000 members now.
Wow.
Um, and I learned a lot of lessons in that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how to not drunk post.
Yeah, can you hook a breathalyzer up to your computer for
And I think the big key lesson was really, and I still learn this today, which is
mm-hmm.
leading through the emotion as opposed to leading with the emotion.
Yeah.
Building out that, massive beer community with a bunch of people that are drunk posting, like, there's a lot of things that can trigger your emotions,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
having to learn how to lead through that as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to with that, because I would see it like dozens and
Yeah.
dozens of times a day of just the interaction, because people are people and they have opinions, and
Yeah.
everybody has an opinion that's like a nose and they all smell.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one way to use that. Yeah. I know it's funny because like we were talking at the top last time I had Net on,
Mhm.
and we got it very similar, like the emotional intelligence and the empathy, and being
Yeah.
like a very, almost what separates the good from the great a lot of the times in our industry is, the people with a lot of empathy and emotional intelligence. But there's a cost to that, right? Like you invest more of yourself. It's not necessarily a job. It's not even, it's a career. It's just like, it's your time investment,
Right.
and it's who you are as you put into this thing. And I, from a personal standpoint, that is like the areas that I always want to try to improve on, is like that increased emotional intelligence. So I find I'll,
Mhm.
I'll put myself into something, and then, when there is any sort of, I don't want to say friction, but when there is something that maybe a difference or something that we have to address at a certain point, it's hard to be like, well, I just got to remove emotions from this decision. I think there's a lot of power in bringing your emotions into the decision, but like
Mhm.
wielding them is the hard part.
Yes.
Like, I can be heated on something, but like there's a way to have that conversation, and it can go from heated to passionate
Mhm.
or back very
Well,
easy. So
I'm pretty fortunate that I have a really great team around me. I'm literally dealing with this
same. Yeah.
right now internally, right? So, switching CRMs is not fun. It's not
Oof, yeah.
easy. It's a pain in the neck. And,
Mm-hmm.
for me to be able to lead through that by listening to our team, listening to what they need, hearing
Mm-hmm.
why they want to do this, and me being like, I ain't doing HubSpot. I ain't giving them the money. I can't stand HubSpot. I'm
Right.
like, and like being like, no, I need to be able to take my own bias out of the
Right.
conversation, hear from those people around us, and make good business decisions. But I'm literally dealing with that right now with
Yeah.
some components of HubSpot, which I absolutely hate, but our
Yeah.
team loves.
So yeah, it's a very, especially when you're as like actually invested, like it is your your baby essentially, right? So fantastic. Well, that it's been, absolutely amazing being able to reconnect with you in a less busy fashion, not a
Yeah.
conference floor and passing. So I always, look forward to these interviews, and I'm super thankful for you being able to take the time to speak with me. Anything you want to say kind of to the audience, pitch, anything like that?
No, so I mean, you know where to find us. You know what we do.
Yeah.
I want to just thank you, Matt, for having me on here. Where will we see you next? Because our conference schedule is posted on our website. All the
Mm,
places. But where will we see you next? So maybe we can reconnect again in person, and I
yeah.
can teach you how to properly drink a bourbon.
Ooh. Yeah, that's always a good question, right? I don't really do the tours or the circuits. I'll be, potentially at like some vendor-based events like NerdioCon. I'll be at
Mhm.
likely at the PAX 8 Beyond conference.
Nice,
Who knows? Maybe ASCII events in Toronto, right? Local
nice.
channel next. We'll see. Whatever I kind
Well,
of sneak my
hopefully,
way into.
hopefully we will see you at PAX 8 Beyond. We'll be
Mm,
there, and maybe I
excellent.
could do a little bourbon tasting class and teach people, even though I'm not drinking. I can still teach people.
Oh, I'm sure we could find an audience for that.
Of course.
Fantastic. Anyways, thank you so much for joining
Thanks.
us, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks.